As someone who's suffered through every single South Park game ever made, yes, even the pinball ones, I can tell you that most of them are crimes against humanity. But here's what nobody talks about. There's actually a perfect formula for South Park game success, and it took developers 15 years to discover it. Today, we're ranking all 7 levels from the games that made you question your life choices to the ones that proved interactive South Park could actually work better than the show itself. We're starting at the absolute bottom, where somehow the impossible happened. The game that made South Park boring. Level 1 is Chef's Luv Shack, and somehow, and I cannot stress this enough, someone managed to make South Park boring. This should violate the fundamental laws of physics. We're talking about a show where a character literally dies every episode, and yet this game exists as proof that you can drain the entertainment value out of anything if you try hard enough. Chef's Luv Shack stands as the only D-tier South Park game ever made, which is actually an impressive achievement in its own right. It's a party game mashup that throws trivia questions at you between random minigames, like musical chairs but with fewer chairs and more existential dread. The concept sounds reasonable on paper. Take South Park's irreverent humor and mix it with competitive party gaming. But here's where reality crashes into your living room. There's literally no AI opponent in solo mode. You're just sitting there alone, spinning your wheels, answering South Park trivia questions. Well, some South Park trivia, but mostly generic game show questions, with absolutely nobody to compete against. Picture this. You boot up the game, Chef's digital ghost materializes on your screen, and he starts judging your loneliness while you click through questions about Kenny's deaths, mixed with completely random trivia that has nothing to do with the show. It's like playing chess against yourself, except chess has strategy, and this has Chef asking you which episode Butters first appeared in, followed by some generic question about world capitals while you contemplate your life choices. Game reviewers noted that this was basically your only option if you'd already burned out on You Don't Know Jack, which is like saying this sandwich is your only choice if you've already eaten all the actual food. The comparison alone should tell you everything you need to know about the quality bar we're dealing with here. This is a South Park game where the most offensive thing isn't the humor, it's how mind-numbingly dull the experience becomes. In a franchise built on pushing boundaries and shocking audiences, Chef's Luv Shack manages to be aggressively mediocre. You get trivia about the show mixed with generic mini-games that could have been themed around literally any property. The South Park license feels completely wasted here, like using a flamethrower to light a birthday candle when a match would work just fine. The real tragedy is how disconnected this feels from what makes South Park actually entertaining. Matt Stone and Trey Parker had minimal involvement in this project, which explains why playing it feels like watching someone else's impression of South Park rather than the real thing. When the creators aren't driving the creative direction, you get generic party game mechanics dressed up in South Park costumes, and the results speak for themselves. You can practically see the development process. Some executive probably said South Park is popular. Party games are popular. Let's combine them without considering whether that combination would actually work. It's the gaming equivalent of putting pineapple on pizza, technically possible, but that doesn't mean you should do it. This bargain bin nightmare proves a fundamental truth that'll become really important as we go through this list. Slapping South Park characters onto random gameplay doesn't automatically make anything entertaining. The show's humor and personality can't survive being forced into inappropriate formats, especially when there's no creative vision holding the pieces together. Chef's Luv Shack teaches us that South Park games need to be South Park first and games second, not the other way around. When you prioritize generic gameplay mechanics over authentic South Park experience, you end up with something that satisfies nobody and entertains no one. But the gaming industry apparently looked at this disaster and thought, you know what we need to try next? Even more genres that make absolutely no sense. When South Park tried to be other games. Level 2 brings us to the baffling decision to turn South Park into a first-person shooter and a racing game. These developers looked at Chef's Luv Shack and somehow concluded the problem wasn't genre mismatch, it was insufficient genre confusion. The original South Park FPS had everything going for it on paper. You got the 4 main kids as playable characters, all the classic supporting cast making appearances, and a bizarre arsenal of goofy weapons that should have been comedy gold. Picture this: Cartman running around with a rocket launcher, Kenny getting repeatedly demolished by explosions, and Stan wielding ridiculous South Park-themed firearms like turkeys, snowballs, and toy guns. This concept writes itself, right? Wrong. Despite having Cartman with explosive weaponry, which should automatically guarantee entertainment, the game somehow wasn't groundbreaking and landed with a thud on most platforms. The shooting mechanics felt generic, the level design was uninspired, uninspired, and the whole experience played like any other budget FPS that happened to have South Park character skins slapped on top. It's like ordering a gourmet burger and getting a McDonald's patty on fancy bread. But the real existential crisis came with South Park Rally, a racing game that seemed to have an identity crisis every 5 minutes. This wasn't traditional racing where you compete for first place and call it a day. No. Rally decided to throw non-linear objectives at you, like delivering antidotes and collecting mad cow disease power-ups, because nothing says fun racing experience like stopping mid-race to complete random fetch quests. The game encouraged player interaction instead of actual racing, creating what promotional materials called insane and wildly fun gameplay that critics found about as exciting as watching paint dry. You'd start a race thinking you understood the rules, then suddenly you're supposed to be delivering medical supplies while other players are launching attacks at you. It was like playing Mario Kart if Mario Kart forgot it was supposed to be about racing and decided to become a weird delivery simulator instead. The fundamental problem with both games becomes crystal clear when you look at Parker and Stone's involvement, or rather, their lack of involvement. Sure, they contributed some voice lines here and there, but they weren't driving the creative direction behind either project. The creators who understood what made South Park actually funny were sitting on the sidelines while other people made creative decisions about their characters. These games treated South Park like a costume you put on generic gameplay, instead of building around the show's actual strengths. The FPS ignored South Park's satirical edge and social commentary in favor of mindless shooting. Rally threw out coherent racing mechanics to chase some bizarre hybrid concept that satisfied nobody. Neither game asked the crucial question, what makes South Park funny, and how do we translate that into interactive entertainment? When you prioritize existing gameplay mechanics over authentic South Park experience, you get confused messes that don't know what they want to be. The FPS wanted to be Doom with South Park characters. Rally wanted to be some weird combination of racing game and action-adventure that existed nowhere else for good reason. Both games failed because they started with genres and tried to force South Park into those molds. These misguided experiments proved that having the right characters isn't enough if you're forcing them into completely wrong genres. You can't just take Cartman, give him a gun, and expect comedy gold to happen automatically. The humor has to be baked into the core gameplay experience, not sprinkled on top like seasoning on bland food. But at least these disasters were memorable disasters. The franchise's next phase would somehow achieve something even more impressive than spectacular failure: the games everyone forgot existed. Level 3 represents a remarkable achievement in modern entertainment, making South Park games so forgettable that even die-hard fans pretend they don't exist. These aren't terrible disasters that become legendary for their awfulness. They're just aggressively mediocre experiences that vanish from your memory the moment you stop playing them. Tennerman's Revenge stands as the series' only multiplayer platformer, which should have been significant given how rare that combination actually is. The game built its entire premise around Cartman's half-brother Scott Tenorman rivalry, tapping into one of the show's most beloved recurring antagonists. Scott Tenorman made Cartman eat his own parents in chili, for crying out loud. This is premium South Park material that writes itself. But despite having access to one of the show's best ongoing jokes, the platforming mechanics left little lasting impact, often feeling like generic platform jumping despite promising elements. The jumping felt floaty, the level design was uninspired, and the multiplayer components never clicked in any meaningful way. You had this rich source material about revenge and family dysfunction, and somehow it translated into standard platforming that could have featured any characters from any franchise. Snow Day arrived as the franchise's latest attempt at redemption, bringing modern 3D graphics and heavy creator involvement to the table. This wasn't some rushed cash grab. Parker and Stone were actively participating in development. The visuals got a complete overhaul, and the entire experience focused on cooperative gameplay that should have captured the essence of kids playing together in South Park. The game aimed to recapture that authentic TV episode vibe with show-grade writing and updated visual presentation. You got voice acting that matched the series, storylines that felt like they could have come from actual episodes, and production values that suggested real effort went into making this work. On paper, Snow Day represented everything fans had been asking for since the franchise started making games. But here's the crushing irony. Even with all the right ingredients assembled in one package, it still felt a bit try-hard and, while offering plenty to enjoy for fans, didn't quite hit the high mark set by other games despite its creator involvement. The co-op mechanics felt forced rather than natural. The updated graphics somehow made everything feel less authentic rather than more polished, and the overall experience never captured that effortless South Park humor, despite having the creators directly involved. Missing crossplay functionality at launch became the perfect symbol of how these games always seemed one step behind modern gaming expectations. Here you had a cooperative experience that should have brought people together, but technical limitations kept players separated based on their platform choices. It's like organizing a party and then forgetting to tell half the guests where it's happening. Both games represent what I call the almost but not quite tier of South Park gaming. They're serviceable enough that you won't demand your money back, but not memorable enough that you'll recommend them to friends or replay them months later. They exist in this weird middle ground where they're neither spectacular successes nor spectacular failures, just forgettable entries that fade into gaming history. These middle ground entries prove that good intentions and show involvement aren't enough without inspired execution behind them. You can have the right creators, the right characters, and the right production values, but if the core gameplay experience doesn't click, none of those advantages matter. It's like having all the ingredients for a great meal, but forgetting how to cook. Everything you need is sitting right there, but the final result still disappoints. What's truly bizarre is that while these ambitious console attempts struggled to capture South Park's essence, the most unexpected gaming format would somehow crack the code completely: silver balls and mechanical genius. Level 4 brings us the shocking revelation that pinball machines understood South Park better than most console developers ever did. While major studios were fumbling around trying to force the franchise into inappropriate genres, simple mechanical tables with silver balls and spring-loaded bumpers somehow nailed what made South Park actually entertaining. The 1999 Sega Stern physical pinball machine captured the show's essence through nothing more complicated than bumpers and chrome chambers. This wasn't some technological marvel with cutting-edge graphics or complex AI systems. Just mechanical precision, well-placed ramps, and South Park theming that actually felt authentic to the source material. The table managed to translate the show's chaotic energy into physical form through carefully designed ball physics and strategic target placement. While big studios were creating existential crises with confused racing mechanics and generic shooting galleries, this simple pinball table nailed the South Park experience through pure mechanical genius. The ball ricocheting around the playfield captured that same unpredictable energy you get from watching Cartman's schemes spiral out of control. Every bumper hit and ramp shot felt like another beat in a South Park episode's escalating madness. The physical machine still circulates in arcades today, which proves its lasting appeal and authentic feel in ways that most video game adaptations never achieved. You can walk into random arcade locations and find this table still drawing players who want that genuine South Park experience. The fact that a mechanical game from decades ago maintains more staying power than most digital attempts speaks volumes about getting the fundamentals right. The digital era expanded on this success with Zen Studios' Super Sweet Pinball and Butter's very own pinball game, bringing the arcade experience to home platforms without losing what made it work. These weren't just digital recreations of generic pinball mechanics with South Park skins slapped on top. The developers understood that voice lines and on-table references needed to echo the show's actual comedic style, rather than just featuring recognizable characters. These digital tables proved that simple audio cues and visual references could capture South Park's humor better than sprawling open worlds ever did. When Kenny gets launched off a ramp and his muffled voice delivers a classic line, that single moment contains more authentic South Park DNA than entire levels of previous console attempts. The format naturally accommodates the show's rapid-fire joke delivery and character interactions. Butters getting his own widely liked table in the 2-pack proves that even the most innocent character works perfectly in this format. If you can make Butters entertaining in pinball form, you've basically solved the South Park adaptation puzzle. His naturally optimistic personality translates beautifully into the celebratory nature of pinball scoring, where every successful shot triggers positive audio feedback that matches his character perfectly. The arcade-to-digital transition maintained that South Park through-and-through experience with show-accurate theming that never felt forced or artificial. The pinball format naturally accommodates South Park's episodic structure, where each game session feels like experiencing a compressed version of show chaos. Every ball launch starts a new mini-episode of unpredictable events and escalating action. These pinball games prove that sometimes the simplest mechanical interpretation preserves IP humor better than complex adaptations trying to be everything at once. It's like the difference between a perfectly seasoned burger and some complicated fusion dish that loses the essence of what made the original ingredients good. Pinball strips away unnecessary complexity and focuses on translating core entertainment value into interactive form. The format match between pinball chaos and South Park's comedic energy created something that felt natural rather than forced, teaching the industry valuable lessons about choosing appropriate gameplay formats for beloved properties. But this wasn't the only unexpected platform that would crack the South Park code. Pocket-sized South Park success. Level 5 brings us the counterintuitive truth that mobile gaming, usually the graveyard of beloved franchises where good IPs go to die, actually got South Park right. This is like discovering that airplane food has somehow become gourmet dining. Mobile platforms typically turn everything into soulless cash grabs with timers and energy meters, but somehow South Park found a way to thrive in this wasteland. Phone Destroyer represents the mobile era's most polished South Park experience, balancing show-accurate art style with card-collecting strategy that actually makes sense. The game maintains that classic South Park cutout animation look while building real-time strategy mechanics around it. You're not just tapping mindlessly to make numbers go up. You're actually making tactical decisions about unit placement and resource management that require genuine thought. Despite the dreaded microtransaction structure that makes everyone immediately suspicious, it somehow maintains authentic South Park humor and presentation throughout the entire experience. The monetization feels optional rather than mandatory, which is practically unheard of in modern mobile gaming. You can enjoy the core experience without constantly hitting paywalls that demand your credit card information every 5 minutes. The new kid protagonist navigates costumed battles while preserving that crucial interactive episode vibe that makes South Park games actually feel like South Park. Your character doesn't talk, which lets the supporting cast carry the dialogue and comedy exactly like they do in the show. The costumes and themes rotate through different South Park storylines, so you get pirates fighting ninjas, fighting superheroes in ways that feel naturally chaotic rather than randomly assembled. Tower Defense arrived as the XBLA surprise hit with engaging local and online multiplayer over a dozen playable characters from across the show's universe. This wasn't just another generic tower defense game with South Park skins slapped on top. The developers actually understood that each character needed unique abilities that matched their personalities from the show, creating strategic depth that went beyond simple stat differences. Critics praised the marriage of South Park wit and strategic engagement, even in an oversaturated genre where tower defense games were flooding every digital storefront. The humor integrated naturally with the gameplay mechanics, instead of feeling like separate components that never quite connected. When Cartman's special ability activates, it feels like something Cartman would actually do, not like some random power-up that could belong to any character. Both games demonstrate careful IP handling that avoids being simple cash grabs designed to extract money from nostalgic fans. The developers clearly spent time understanding what makes South Park entertaining before building game mechanics around those elements. It's like the difference between a cover band that studies the original songs versus one that just plays whatever sounds close enough. These mobile entries succeed because they treat South Park like South Park, not like generic mobile game templates wearing South Park costumes. They preserve the show's comedic timing, visual style, and character personalities while building gameplay systems that complement rather than compete with those elements. The strategy mechanics enhance the South Park experience instead of overwhelming it with unnecessary complexity. The mobile and tower defense entries illustrate how mature, show-flavored balance between IP fidelity and playable mechanics actually works in practice. You get games that satisfy South Park fans while also providing genuinely engaging gameplay for people who care more about strategy than nostalgia. Neither game sacrifices its core entertainment value to chase broader market appeal or simplified mechanics. These successes finally proved that the right approach could work, setting the stage for someone to ask the most obvious question that nobody had bothered asking for over a decade. The first true South Park game. Level 6 brings us the mind-blowing realization that it took 15 years for someone to ask the most obvious question in gaming history. What if we just made an interactive South Park episode? This breakthrough moment seems so simple in retrospect that you wonder how the entire gaming industry missed it for over a decade. The Stick of Truth finally captures the show's voice, humor, and aesthetic in a richly crafted RPG experience that feels authentic from the opening cutscene to the final credits. This wasn't another attempt at forcing South Park into inappropriate gameplay formats. Instead, Obsidian Entertainment built their entire design philosophy around preserving what makes South Park actually entertaining, while creating mechanics that enhance rather than compete with that entertainment value. Obsidian's involvement alongside Parker and Stone's direct script writing and voice participation creates the first genuine live episode feel in South Park gaming history. The creators weren't just lending their names or recording a few voice lines for promotional materials. They actively participated in crafting storylines, dialogue, and character interactions that match the show's writing quality and comedic timing. Parker's dedication reached almost absurd levels. When he needed emergency gallbladder surgery during development, he actually convinced his doctor to let him temporarily leave the hospital just to record dialogue. That's commitment to authenticity that borders on medical malpractice. The brilliant class system showcases this authentic approach through choices like the Jew class, which provides exactly the kind of boundary-pushing humor that makes South Park memorable. The game doesn't shy away from controversial content or try to sanitize the experience for broader audiences. Your character class affects dialogue options, NPC reactions, and combat abilities in ways that reflect South Park's willingness to tackle sensitive topics through comedy. Combat mechanics embrace signature toilet humor where farts become magical abilities, and various bodily functions serve as weapons and status effects. This isn't juvenile humor thrown in for shock value. It's integrated gameplay where your character's digestive system becomes a tactical resource. Timing your fart attacks requires actual skill, and different fart types produce different combat effects that influence strategy and enemy encounters. The censorship controversy reveals how committed everyone involved was to preserving South Park's authentic voice. 7 scenes got replaced with descriptive text cards in European and Australian markets, including explicit content that pushed boundaries even by South Park standards. Rather than removing this content entirely or creating sanitized alternatives, the developers chose to acknowledge the censorship directly. Parker and Stone framed these regional restrictions as market decisions rather than moral compromises, staying true to their boundary-pushing approach while acknowledging different cultural standards. Stone later admitted that the work involved in making the game was much more than he and Parker had anticipated, saying they retooled stuff they didn't like and worked on the game longer than other people would have preferred. This level of perfectionist dedication shows why the final product felt so authentic. The critical and commercial success proved that authentic adaptation actually works better than generic crowd-pleasing. Reviews consistently praised the game for feeling like an extended South Park episode, with many critics noting that the RPG format perfectly accommodated the show's storytelling style and character development. Sales figures reflected this positive reception, showing that audiences were hungry for genuine South Park gaming experiences. The Stick of Truth achieves what reviewers described as feeling like one long episode thanks to the creator's heavy involvement throughout development. Every dialogue exchange, quest objective, and story beat maintains consistency with the show's established tone and universe. It's like watching South Park, except you control the new kid's actions and decisions throughout the adventure. This breakthrough proves the secret formula that had been hiding in plain sight for 15 years. When you treat South Park like South Park instead of like a generic video game wearing a South Park costume, magic actually happens. But apparently, someone thought they could take this winning formula and somehow make it even better. Superhero perfection achieved. Level 7 brings us the audacious claim that Ubisoft somehow perfected perfection, taking an already great formula and making it even better. This sounds impossible. How do you improve on something that critics already called a perfect adaptation? But The Fractured But Whole proves that lightning can strike twice in the same franchise, which violates basically every rule of sequel development in gaming history. The Fractured But Whole expands on its predecessor with superhero themes and sophisticated grid-based combat that transforms every battle into a tactical chess match. Instead of simple turn-based fighting where you select attacks from menus, you now position characters on a grid where placement actually matters for strategy. Your team formation affects damage output, defensive capabilities, and special attack combinations in ways that reward actual planning rather than button mashing. The shift from Obsidian Entertainment to Ubisoft San Francisco could have ruined everything, because changing development studios usually kills continuity and destroys whatever magic made the original work. But instead of creating a disconnected sequel that felt like a different franchise, the transition somehow elevated the entire experience to new heights. It's like switching directors mid-trilogy and somehow getting a better movie instead of a confusing mess. The expanded cast of Coon and Friends vs. Freedom Pals offers 10 character archetypes with dynamic team synergy that creates hundreds of strategic combinations. Each superhero identity comes with unique abilities that reflect the kids' personalities while providing distinct tactical advantages. Cartman's Coon persona plays differently from Kyle's Human Kite, not just in terms of stats, but in how their abilities interact with other team members and environmental factors. The tactical positioning system rewards genuine strategy while maintaining South Park's chaotic humor throughout every encounter. You're calculating optimal placement for maximum damage output while listening to Cartman argue about superhero copyright infringement. The combat mechanics demand real thought and planning, but the dialogue and character interactions preserve that effortless South Park comedy that made the first game so entertaining. The development journey demonstrates true creator collaboration through technical challenges that required retooling game engines to accommodate the cutout aesthetic perfectly. The team integrated recent episodes and storylines from the show's current seasons, proving that Parker and Stone remained actively involved throughout production, rather than just lending their names to marketing materials. This wasn't a cash grab sequel. It was a genuine creative partnership that treated the source material with respect. The DLC expansions, From Dusk Till Casa Bonita and Bring the Crunch, broadened the experience with additional storylines that maintained the same quality standards as the base game. These weren't throwaway content packs designed to extract extra money from fans. They provided substantial new adventures that felt like natural extensions of the core experience rather than disconnected bonus material. The juvenile title pun perfectly encapsulates why these games work so well. They're not afraid to be offensive in service of the joke. Most developers would have chosen a safer, more marketable title that wouldn't potentially offend anyone. But South Park games succeed precisely because they maintain that willingness to push boundaries and risk controversy for comedic effect. The Fractured But Whole represents the absolute peak where creator involvement, cohesive tone, robust gameplay mechanics, and boundary-pushing humor converge into the franchise's strongest achievement. Every element works together instead of competing for attention, creating something that satisfies both South Park fans and RPG enthusiasts without compromising either audience's expectations. Looking back at this entire gaming journey from trivia, disasters to tactical masterpieces, you start to notice something interesting emerging from all the successes and failures. The secret sauce revealed. The pattern reveals itself with mathematical precision. There's actually a perfect formula hiding in plain sight, and it's so obvious that you'll wonder how the gaming industry missed it for decades. The secret sauce isn't some complex algorithm or revolutionary technology. It's treating South Park like South Park instead of treating it like a video game that happens to feature South Park characters. Every successful South Park game treats the experience like an interactive TV episode, rather than a game with South Park characters slapped on top. The pinball machines work because they capture the show's chaotic energy through mechanical physics. The mobile games succeed because they preserve the visual style and humor while building mechanics around those elements. The RPGs dominate because they let you play through actual South Park storylines with authentic dialogue and character development. The failures all made the same fundamental mistake. They prioritized generic gameplay mechanics over authentic South Park experience every single time. Chef's Luv Shack started with party game templates and tried to force South Park into that mold. The FPS and racing games took existing genres and dressed them up with South Park costumes. These approaches guaranteed failure because they put the cart before the horse, focusing on what type of game to make instead of how to make South Park interactive. Creator involvement directly correlates with game quality in ways that should embarrass the entire gaming industry. Chef's Luv Shack had minimal input from Parker and Stone, and it became the most boring entertainment product ever created. The early FPS and racing attempts featured limited voice work but no creative direction from the actual creators. Meanwhile, The Stick of Truth and The Fractured But Whole involved heavy collaboration throughout development, resulting in experiences that feel like extended episodes rather than licensed cash grabs. The best games aren't afraid to be offensive when it serves the humor. Just like the show itself maintains its boundary-pushing approach across 26 seasons. The RPGs include controversial content that got censored in multiple markets, but they refuse to sanitize the experience for broader appeal. The pinball games embrace toilet humor and inappropriate jokes because that's what makes South Park actually entertaining. Meanwhile, the forgettable middle-tier games played it safe and lost their souls in the process. The 26-season gaming history proves that franchise loyalty alone isn't enough without the right approach to adaptation. South Park fans will buy anything with their favorite characters on it, but that doesn't guarantee satisfaction or lasting entertainment value. The disasters sold copies based on name recognition, but left players feeling cheated. The masterpieces earned genuine praise because they delivered authentic South Park experiences that justified the purchase price. The three-part formula emerges clearly. Right developers who understand the IP, meaningful creator involvement, and willingness to push boundaries without compromise. You need all three elements working together because missing any single piece breaks the entire equation. Great developers without creator input produce competent games that miss the mark. Creator involvement without skilled developers results in ambitious failures. Boundary pushing without understanding the source material creates offensive garbage instead of authentic humor. This transforms the entire concept of what makes a successful IP adaptation in gaming. Like discovering that the recipe for great pizza isn't about expensive ingredients, but about understanding how those ingredients work together. Most adaptations fail because they treat beloved properties like marketing tools instead of creative foundations that should guide every development decision. The journey from trivia trash to RPG masterpieces isn't about better graphics, more complex mechanics, or bigger budgets. It's about understanding what makes the source material actually work and building everything else around that core insight. When developers finally embrace this approach, they create gaming experiences that transcend their medium entirely. The best South Park games succeed because they stop trying to be video games and start trying to be South Park. This isn't rocket science, but it took the gaming industry 15 years to figure out. When you prioritize authenticity over innovation, magic happens. This lesson applies to every beloved property that deserves better than generic adaptations. Stop forcing franchises into predetermined formats. Let the source material guide your creative decisions instead of fighting against what makes it special. Sometimes honoring what you love means letting it drive the experience completely, even when that challenges everything you think you know about game development.